What's going on, guys? So I want to talk about the new series Man of Steel by Brian Michael Bendis, and also some of the changes that are being made through the introduction of Rogol Zaar. And he's a character that we were teased about towards the end of Action Comic issue 1000. And within that introduction, Brian Michael Bendis and Jim Lee established very well that not only is this guy a formidable opponent, but in the upcoming series Man of Steel, which we're going to talk about a bit here, that moving forward, he is the person that is responsible for the destruction of Krypton. And so, first thing, for you guys that's been rocking with me for a minute, you know how I feel about retcons. And for me personally, I either love it or hate it. It's very rare that I kind of land in between on something being changed with a character or continuity that we've known for quite some time. And I have to say, a majority of my opinion on that, it weighs on the writing, with the ratio of what's changed and what's kept. But even more important than that is the character arc, their history, their motivations, what drives them to execute the goal that they're so passionate about. And for Rogol Zaar, we start to explore a bit of that in the new Man of Steel series. And what I really like about what Bendis is doing with this, even early on, it's very clear that he loves Superman as a character. And I've mentioned for some time now that Superman is one of those characters who's kind of suffered over the years because a lot of people say he's too powerful, he's too much of a Boy Scout, and for those reasons, a good Superman story was very few and far between. And I believe I mentioned this back when I was doing a bunch of Hulk videos, or probably when I started the Weapon H playlist. I probably mentioned it both times, because the Hulk suffered the same for a while until Greg Pak came along and we got Heart of the Monster and World War Hulk and more recently Weapon H. And I really feel like Brian Michael Bendis is going to do the same for Superman. Because with Superman, more recently, Jonathan Kent has been hands down the best thing that has happened to his character. And I say that only considering individual Superman stories, and not necessarily world-ending or catastrophic events, like Crisis on Infinite Earths or Dark Knight's Metal, or Superboy Prime or anything like that. Because even though he's been included heavily in these larger events, like Convergence for example, and as far as Superman, pretty much anywhere there's big action, he's gonna be there because he's Superman. And there are a lot more events that I could run down the list of. But as far as focusing on the smaller stories, and the character-driven stories, Jonathan Kent has been one of the best examples of a new challenge to Superman that we haven't seen before. And for Dan Jurgens and Lee Weeks, the creators of Jonathan Kent, back in Convergence, they did a wonderful job of ushering in this new character who would challenge Superman later on a personal level through the course of many events. And that's what I believe Bendis is doing with Rogol Zaar, because he's going to bring something that not a lot of Superman villains bring to the table, and that's depth. Because you gotta admit, with the exception of Spider-Man, Superman has one of the weakest rogue galleries of any superhero. And my hopes, which may be a little bit high, I'll let you guys tell me down in the comments, but my hopes that are going forward with Rogol Zaar, I'm hoping that through the plans of Bendis, that he's the first that'll come of many later on down the line. Fingers crossed. But getting into the Man of Steel series, we find out that many years ago, Rogol Zaar approached the Quintessence requesting that the Kryptonians as a race were to be cleansed from the universe. And for those of you who may not be sure of what exactly the Quintessence is, they're really like DC's version of the Council of Godheads. And they first appeared back in '96 in the Kingdom Come storyline, but their main purpose is to watch over and keep order in the universe. And when Rogol Zaar approaches them and proposes to them to wipe out Krypton, he considers Krypton to be a plague because they prey on the weaker planets for their resources. One of those planets may very well have been his. At this point we don't know because there's still a lot of mystery to his character. But I will say that I noticed this flashback happened before he has the green scars on the right side of his face and his arm. But he requests not to go at war with the Kryptons, but to wipe them out completely. And in his words, cleansing them from the universe. And at this point, really determining if it's personal or just strategic is pretty tough to do. My guess is a bit of both, and possibly once we get the whole story, we find out how his face and his arm were scarred, because my guess at this point is that it all ties together. Because when he proposed this idea to the Quintessence, he gave them a reason why war was not an option. That reason being because it would deplete all of their resources. But I would also go as far to guess that one of the weaker planets that Krypton took resources from happened to be his home planet. And my reason for saying that is because after he made this request to the Quintessence, he later went back to this unnamed planet that has very harsh living conditions. And we later find out that the reason why is because he wants to keep his mind and his body sharp in between different wars. Like, you don't have to get ready if you stay ready. But I also believe there's a possibility that this planet was once a planet that he called home, and sometime in the past, their resources were depleted by the Kryptonians. And to me, that would explain more of the personal edge or his personal vendetta, not just being about revenge, but also preventing this from happening to other planets. but it's here on this unnamed planet, Rogol is visited by Appa Aliapsa. And what's interesting here is that this is not only the first time that someone has visited him period, let alone a member of the Quintessence, but with us seeing him having access to visiting the council, and also a member of the council not physically visiting him, but also projecting and making contact to him. But with this happening and even the words that are exchanged, it leads us to believe that Rogol has a very close history with the council. And I mean close, like him executing the decisions that they've made. But when Appa appears here to Rogol in this cave that is his home, he merely just comes to tell him that the council has reached their decision and they have decided that the answer is no, because for Rogol and his history with the Kryptonians, for him this would be too personal. And then he just dipped on him with the shiny quote like, "Thank you for your services." But then he disappeared before Rogol could even get a word in. Like after the answer was no, Rogol was like, "We can do this another way. Are they paying you off? Like what's going on?" But at that point he was just talking to dial tone smoke. His request was denied and that conversation was over. But even though that's the most that we've been given so far about his background, and we know for a fact that at this point that Krypton has been destroyed, but we also know that this was not the end. Like his story did not end here, because even though he was denied by the council, we also know that at some point in time Rogol had some level of communication with Jor-El, and we know this because of Action Comics 1000 when he told Superman that he promised Jor-El that his bloodline would end and he would cure the universe of the sickness which he considers to be the Kryptonian race. And for that reason we know that he met Jor-El, and for all we know Jor-El may have done that to his face, but the actual execution of him destroying Krypton is something we have yet to see, because those are the two pieces that we're missing as of this point. The before, when this quote personal incident happened, and then the after he was denied by the council, the after effect of him actually destroying Krypton. Because after being denied by the council, he may have gone on his own and done this, or the council may have changed their mind for whatever reason and gave him the green light. And I say that because the Appa Aliapsa that we see in this narrative, in this flashback, we know that at some point in the future that he'll isolate himself on Oa, and in that isolation he just totally goes out of his mind. But what if throughout the course of this 2018 series of Man of Steel, what if we see some earlier signs of not just his not so noble behavior, but also more the questionable decisions that we've seen him make as a member of the council? I just think that would be interesting to explore a little bit more. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. But going back to the Man of Steel series, issue number 1, we see Clark dealing with a number of arson fires in Metropolis, both as Clark and as Superman. And I like that he finds Firefly hiding in Metropolis. Like he figured it was the last place anybody will look for him. And off the top of my head, I kind of felt like I've seen that particular scene before. Or I might be thinking of something close to it. If one of you guys recognize it, just let me know in the comments. And I'm talking about the whole thing with Firefly hiding from Batman in Superman City. And I could just be thinking about something entirely different, who knows. But either way, with what I mentioned earlier about Jonathan Kent, we get one of the rare mentions that I hope to see a bit more of in the future. And here it's taken very lightly, just the fact that he's growing out of his clothes, he needs new clothes or whatever. But I like that that's done for the sake of the long term, because eventually we gotta see into his late teens and early 20s, and it doesn't make sense that that happens overnight. And I just like Bendis throwing little things in there like that, without us needing to travel into the future this time. Though I did like that too. But with the way that the first issue ended, like on this cliffhanger, this bright light coming, as the reader, we don't see what it is, but we have to wait till the next issue. My first impressions are that this is a continuation into what we saw previously with Action Comics number 1000. And my reason for saying that also is because these random fires that Clark is investigating, they may have very well been a tactic from Rogol, who first appears with fire all over him, doing him little to no harm, but this may have been a tactic for him to find both Superman and Supergirl and follow them until the time was right to strike Superman and then Supergirl, and then eventually go for Jonathan Kent. And at this point in time, I'm not sure if he's even aware of Jonathan Kent, but if he discovers Jonathan, there is no question that he's going for him, because he wants every Kryptonian gone, no exceptions. And don't take me wrong, there are a handful of good Superman comics, but we're talking about over the course of 80 years. And as far as Batman, who premiered about a year after Superman, I think Superman was 1938 and Batman was 1939, but over all that time there are countless numbers of good issues for Batman, and there's a whole slew of villains with compelling backstories combating Batman. But as far as Superman, not so much. And that's where I really feel like Rogol Zaar is going to be the first of more villains exclusive to Superman that are going to have more substance. But last thing I wanted to mention, I just thought it was very interesting with Bendis and Jim Lee. And you guys know I love Jim Lee's design and creations, but with Jim Lee going with this orc-like inspiration for the design of Rogol, I just thought that was spot on and pretty brilliant, and I can't wait to see more of his past, especially before his scars, and see how different he looked before this green scars on the right side of his face and his arm had happened. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comments about Rogol, this new Man of Steel series, and even the whole idea of this retcon bringing a personal connection to this new character. Let me know down in the comments, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.